All right, what is up, guys? Sorry about that. I knew I was live, but then I forgot that I was live, and I was like throwing graphics on the screen to just take a look at how they how they were showing up. It's been a long day. It's been a long week, but it's Saturday, so that's good. It's an unusual Saturday live stream, which actually I'm kind of thankful for. We have a different purpose tonight a little bit, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. You guys saw the thumbnail for this. It was a terrible thumbnail. I just had to throw it together today in the midst of kind of just running all over the place. You know, we'll get into all that. I'm going to start tonight with, well, I don't know. Let's go to the normal Eagle Rare. I would like to start with a little Eagle Rare store pick, and then I have one sample to taste before we get into tonight's kind of main theme, which is this flight of whiskeys that I've put together for an event that's happening tomorrow afternoon. So we've got all that to talk about, but I do want to just get a little whiskey in my system. I just got done playing a concert this evening, ran in the door, and here we are live. Please hit that like button if you are in here. Let's get a few more folks. I know it's an unusual timing. I know the UFC's on tonight. As soon as I get off here, I'm going to be pulling up a stream of that legally. Let's just say legally. But for now, let's get into a little Eagle Rare. Let me say cheers to all of you. Say hello when you jump in here. Let me know what you are sipping on, and let's have a fun night tonight. So we got Michael S. Good evening, you wonderful whiskey people. Jeff Perkins. Cheers all. Hope everyone's sipping on something good this evening. I also hope that. Thank you, David. Yeah, everybody hit that like on the way in. Robert E. and Johnny 5. Saturday stream, let's go. Yeah, I did not stream on Thursday. I've been getting very, very little sleep, like 4.5 hours each night. So Thursday it was like, there's just no way I could stream and drink whiskey. It would have destroyed my body. And there's also going to be a little issue next Thursday. It's going to be a late stream on Thursday night. I believe I'll be able to start at 10. I'm playing a concert an hour away at 6. Short gig, hour. Pack up quick, I hope. Get home, jump on, and do a live stream because I don't want to miss next Thursday night. All right, cheers, y'all. Little Eagle Rare. Okay. Let's get a few of these bottles out of the way, at least just for right now. The current state of the whiskey table here is the current state of my brain. Messy, disorganized. Okay. What's up, William Molnar? Cheers, everyone. Sipping some Knob Creek 12. That's going to make an appearance tonight. And Are You Schlammered says, cheers, everyone. Sipping on some Elijah Creek Barrel Proof. All right. So the first thing I want to do is taste a distillery, I believe, from Pennsylvania. This is the single sample I'm going to go with at the beginning of this stream. The tuba player in the Columbus Symphony brought me this sample tonight. He brought the bottle with him. He's from Philly, I think, and he's in town playing. He brought me this sample. I gave him a bunch of stuff as well, and he really wanted me to try this. So let me show you what this bottle is. All right, Manatawny Stillworks. Let me know if you guys are familiar with this bottle. He's done some damage on it already, it looks like. Select 4-grain American whiskey. All right, so American whiskey distinction, not a bourbon. So that's the front of the bottle. And the back of the bottle looks like this. All right, so we got 53-gallon barrels, which is great. And there we go, mash bill, 78% malt. So we're talking about an American malt whiskey. I believe you could call it that, but they've just chosen to say 4-grain American whiskey, even though there's 5 grains. Okay, there's 2. Okay, malt and roasted barley. Okay, so 4 grain. I see what they're doing. So you can see right there what the mash bill is. Okay, reading. I don't want to read the tasting notes. Non-chill filtered, which is great. Go back to the front of the bottle real quick. And it's hard to read, but this is an 8-year whiskey. 94 proof, I believe it says. Kind of hard for me to see that from back here. I can't zoom in on that one. Let me see if I have the picture on my my desktop here. I'll zoom in on it this way. Yep, 94 proof, 47%. Manatawny still works, 4-grain American whiskey. Is anybody familiar with this company? Jeff Perkins, sipping on the ADHD/stuff and whiskey NBC pick. Nice. David L., thank you for the super chat. No giveaway tonight, but I appreciate the support as always. Cheers. You were robbed on Matt Madness. Shook fixes in. Real winners. Cam Grease had to be cast off. All right. I forgot that I haven't been live since the Matt Madness defeat, so we may as well get into that for just a second. My patrons have already heard about this. Happy TGI Saturday. Sipping on some Larceny C922. Amazing bottle, man. Cheers to that. R.U. Schlammer's never heard of Manatawny Stillworks. Okay. Yeah, I haven't either. So this is going to be an interesting experience. I'm going to go ahead and get that sample poured. But I want to be able to come into work tomorrow. We have our final concert before he goes back to Pennsylvania. That's the tuba player who gave me the sample. And I want to be able to come into work tomorrow and, kind of tell him what I thought about this whiskey. So we'll see. I know it's not super relevant to a lot of folks here, but that's okay. We need to start the stream with something before we get into this madness. So Matt Madness, very quickly. I am a very competitive person. I am a little bit bummed. And I'm not a little bummed. I'm really, really bummed that I lost. It just is what it is. But I'm less bummed about the fact that the thing that beat me was not just myself for choosing the blue sample bottle as being the point tripler. Yes, I beat myself, but it's also just the fact that, it was a hardcore question that beat me. If the hardcore thing was taken away, I would have won by a point. That's no excuse. This year they're doing the hardcore thing. Matt has increased the stakes and the entertainment value by doing it, and so that's awesome. And David rightfully deserves to go on. So it was a really, really freaking close game, and I just hedged my bets incorrectly when it came to the Fireball thing. In my head, I was like, why would Matt put something that's not Fireball in here? Even if he's like trying to trick us, I still think it's going to be Fireball, and I still hedged against that. And that's just a mistake on my part. So I'm really bummed. I'm sad, but I take some solace in the fact that without the whole hardcore thing, I at least would have done well in that case. But I'm not complaining, and at this point, I really hope Shook wins. I want to see Shook win because Grease and I are both out, and Dutch is out too now. So of last year's people that went to the semis, I think, or I guess finals, plus Grease, former champ, of us, it's just Shook. So I texted Shook today and said, you better win this, dude. So anyways. ECBPC 922 is awesome, says David. 5 deep. It's going to definitely be awesome 5 deep. Michael S. sipping on some Crowded Barrel Alliance release of Balcones. Dark, spicy, yummy. I'm familiar with the fact that Crowded Barrel exists, but I'm not super familiar with a lot of their stuff. I have a few samples from years ago that Lito Cortez sent me back in this, shelf full of samples. Somewhere back there are some Crowded Barrel samples that are at least 2 years old, probably. A lot of Jason C love tonight. I get it. Jason scored quite a few points in his last couple outings. But I'm shook all the way. I'm Dan Shook all the way on this. So. All right, so that's Matt Madness. Cool. Okay, so let's get into this. I'll throw it up on the screen one more time. Let's get into this opening pour. Manatawny Stillworks 4-grain American whiskey, which has a crazy mash bill of 78% malt, 2% roasted barley, 9 wheat, 9 oat, and 2 rye. Who thought of that? I feel like someone just said, give me 5 random numbers that add up to 100. That's the mash bill. Now let's randomly assign grains to that. All right, so let's check this out. 94 proof, non-chill filtered. I like that. But 94 proof's kind of low. 8-year release from this craft distillery. It smells really good. That smells... I thought this was going to smell farmy and weird and crafty and dirt-like. That smells very good. It's like, it really reminds me of a bourbon profile through and through. Even though it's the majority of this, 80%, I think, in total is, malted roasted barley, 80%. Zero corn. Wow, zero corn. Yeah, it's just a bunch of brown sugar. Brown sugar, and that's like the base note. So a lot of times with bourbons, we talk about caramel being the base note. Sometimes with scotch, you'll say toffee. You know, it's a little different spin on that, but it's the same kind of idea where you have just the base note everybody associates bourbon with or scotch with. In this case, the base note here is brown sugar. As this thing is sitting in the glass, it's opening up really a lot of like fall, Thanksgiving, potpourri, clove, spicy, aromatic type spices like clove. You know, when you smell potpourri, it didn't start that way, but just this little time in the glass, it's starting to blossom. This is really nice on the nose. Almost smells like there's a hint of an Amberana finish in the background. It's not overwhelming like a lot of the Starlight cigar blends. Not at all. This is like if you had a very, very light Amberana finish on something. I think it smells great, and it's not too crafty. It's a little weirder on the palate. but really nice. It's strange that that American single malt or American malt whiskey, we should call this. It's kind of strange that American malt whiskey can taste so close to bourbon. If you gave me this blind, I would know something is up, but I don't think I'd be guessing American single malt. I might just be guessing that it's a craft distillery making bourbon, making some sort of, you know, possibly altered mash bill bourbon. Jason Watson says, late to chat. You can take David 2 out of 3, though, right? I think so. I think you take the hardcore away, and I have a little better shot. Although with the Fireball, man, you throw in some Fireball to a flight, and you start throwing trick questions at me, David's probably going to, you know, he's probably going to score some points. JG says, Cameron has a shadow beard. What does that mean? I need a I'll shave after this. Keith Thompson says, I said a while back, people have stopped sending you legacy distilleries. It's like a way to create an even playing field. I love Matt Madness so much, though. You know, you're right, Keith. I mean, the legacy stuff is getting easier and easier to call, which makes sense. What I think even if I would have gotten closer on some of my guesses, I said relating and regarding at the same time, and it just came out as a warbled mess. My guesses relating to like proof and age on some of the other samples, I couldn't separate myself from thinking of the bottle guess. And so I based everything on that. And that was a big problem. It's something I've had a problem with on my own streams doing blinds. And I let that kind of bleed into the Matt Madness round where I thought Elijah Craig barrel proof on glass C, I think it was. I was so sure. So it's like, all right, it doesn't taste like an old school one. It's got to be new school, which is probably around 125 proof, whatever I said. And it's going to be 12 years old. It ended up being that lucky 7 pick. You know, I should have guessed stats and not been bottles in my head. Same thing for the first bottle. Matt had my head spinning with the blend question of the states that are in there where you could lose points if you guessed a wrong state, and it was the Barrel Gold label, which is a really good bottle. If you can handle the Dickel thing in there, if you can handle that minerality, that Barrel Gold label is really good. So keep that in mind if you're not offended by George Dickel products and you're looking for a $500 bottle. That could be the one for you. And then the other one, the Boulder whiskey. I just had no chance on that. Yeah, it was a very interesting round. I'll tell you that much. Johnny says, Shook will probably lose on a Blue Run sample. That would seal the deal of us all just losing. Michael S., I know. I actually saw this part of that stream. I just, you know, the Fireball thing, I really believed it was Fireball, but I hedged against it on the chance that I was going to make that gamble to possibly be the only one that was right if it wasn't Fireball, thinking I could make those points up, you know, and just trying to get inside of Matt's head as the game designer, and it did not work. Was being sick leading up to a legit factor? I don't think so. That would not be a good excuse to make either. I mean, no, because I think my palate was pretty on. I mean, I felt really good that night. So, anyways, if you're hanging out tonight as I finish up this last sip of this Manatawny Stillworks Craft American malt whiskey, 8 years old, very strange but special release from this distillery. Hit that like button, please. Let's get a few more folks hanging out. Then we're going to get into tonight's flight and talk about it. And hopefully this live stream tonight is going to be something that you guys in the live chat can we can really go back and forth about stuff, because it's just a different kind of a stream here. People at Derby party. Oh, it's Clay. What's up, man? Just back from a Derby party, feeling no pain. Strange whiskey, but a really, really cool one. Manatawny Stillworks 8-year. Who would have thought? Oh, you slammered. What if Matt sends all Blue Run samples? I would not put that past him. I really wouldn't. Although sending Blue Run samples, it's kind of tough because they've only distilled, and there's so much sourced Blue Run that it would be kind of hard if that's some of the stuff that got sent. Okay, let's jump in here. So I am going to be a little vague about this, but that's okay. I was asked to lead a bourbon tasting with not a lot of detail. Let's put it that way. Lead a bourbon tasting. This is happening tomorrow afternoon, right after my concert. I'm driving to this country club here in Ohio, here in Columbus, and it's an event that is not based around it's not a bourbon tasting event, but a bourbon tasting is a part of this fundraising event. All right, and there's a catering company involved and some other things, and this country club has a bar, and they have quite a few whiskeys. I have the full list. I'll show you here. Okay. Now, I know the writing on this is super small, and this is, I think, maybe just some of their more special stuff, it seems like, or what they might consider to be special, because there's a lot of basic stuff on this list that's missing, right? Like, I mean, Turkey 101 is not on here. So I'm under the assumption that a lot of things on that list are missing, but probably at the bar at this place, right? And I was tasked with putting a tasting menu together for the event, some tasting notes, and, it was supposed to be like 4 bottles, maybe 5 bottles. So I talked my way up to, I think the original thing was 4. I had 6 bottles as my ideal for this. Now, these events, typically, the catering company and the country club has a set list of Makers, Woodford Rye, Buffalo Trace, and Knob Creek 9-year small batch, so 5 bottles. This is their typical list at these tastings. Now, that's fine. That's a great list, for overpriced bourbon at a country club. But I wanted to do a little something else and theme this whiskey because it was going to be kind of a spring theme. Welcome to spring. The whiskeys were going to be spring flavored in a sense, or maybe lower proof because we don't want the super high proof stuff in the spring. That's for the winter. So the idea was welcome to spring with the derbies around the corner, or happening essentially at this point. The derbies here. At the time I was thinking about this, it was not. It was last week. So these are all factors going into me selecting these bottles. Now, as I go through this, I would love to hear your input in the chat of the things that I've selected as we talk about why I did it as I taste them right now. But the problem is, the rug got pulled out from under me at the last minute today, as I had already planned this live stream, and I have to use their bourbons. We were going to pull these bottles from their inventory, and that got nixed today. And that really, really sucks because I put a lot of work into, thinking about how I was going to present this and the process and everything. Not everybody at this event is going to drink all 6 of these whiskeys. It's a free choice thing. Suggestion is 1, 2, maybe 3 pours. But I wanted to jump on here now and preview this in the case that I get to do this again. And this is like, I put work into it, and I thought, let's do it together as a community and talk about building out a whiskey list for a private tasting event such as this. All right? Keith says, I think maybe Matt doesn't want people to take it seriously, so he's making it more fun. All good. Yeah, and I think that's probably I don't know if he doesn't want it to be taken seriously, but I think he wants to inject a little chaos with hardcore, and I think that's cool, The purist in me doesn't like it, but the masochist in me does. Michael S. Country Club, I know it's definitely not my crowd, but yeah, it's kind of like this benefit or fundraising type thing. And so this bourbon tasting, they have a separate room that they would do these things in at the country club. And so it's become a facet of events that get held at this location. So we were trying to do a spin on that, thinking it was all good. And at the last minute, it got nixed. So now tomorrow I'm going to show up, and I'm just going to kind of generally talk about whiskey, work the room, be available to talk about tasting notes for Makers, Woodford, Woodford Rye, Buffalo Trace, and Knob Creek. Kind of is what it is. But this was my ideal, and we're going to go through my ideal situation for a welcome to spring bourbon tasting at a place where pours are expensive, so we have to rely on more available bottles that are less expensive, so that when they are upcharged at a very expensive country club, it might be $13 for a pour of any of these bottles. It might be 17, which is crazy. And I don't want to serve people a $30 pour of Eagle Rare. That sounds crazy. So these are things going through my head. Travis, everyone's thoughts on Ilu Toasted store picks. That's a great deal, man. If you like that toasted profile, which is a little bit of a drier toast, a little bit more breakfasty, spicy kind of maple syrup, then you're going to dig it. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I like a really, really light toast on those, especially like Penelope picks. If you get a really lightly toasted one, it's good. The other ones taste a little bit more ashtray-like to me. Greg McDonald, even Ralphie with his 5-inch magnifying glass couldn't read that list. I know, Greg. I could break it into some different pictures, I guess, but it would take me a second. I don't want to waste too much time here. So Michael says, so they don't want approachable bourbons. Only one you have that is a hard find would be the Weller. I'm liking your thinking already. So Michael, the thing is, in Ohio, Weller Green Label kind of grows on trees here. Antique, not so much anymore, but the Green Label is definitely pretty available. And so I didn't feel bad making this essentially ground zero for this tasting. And I should reverse these so that they're in the correct order for you guys. All right, in terms of proof. Okay, there we go. What's up, Dustin? Tommy D says, oh, come on, that was funny, Cam. Cheers. What are you talking about, Tommy? Whatever it was probably funny, but I don't know what you're talking about. All right. So when I'm thinking about a welcome to spring bourbon tasting, the first thing I think about, and tell me what comes to mind for you. The first thing is Kentucky Derby, and it's lower proof, right? It's lower proof, and maybe even some bourbons that are going to be a little more fruity and spring-like, maybe a little bit more floral. Things are starting to bloom. The trees are coming back. So I have some ideas in my mind of spring. But I think the biggest thing that I'm considering is that I want to keep things at a lower proof. Also, we're at a fundraising event. You want people to get a little boozed up, spend money, but you also don't want people to be puking on the floor. So those are some considerations. Now, starting with Weller, the reason I went here first is because not only am I considering flavor profile, Weller Green Label is super approachable, right? And as I talk about them, I'm going to pour them. Weller Green is a super approachable whiskey. It's $22 here in Ohio. Pretty available. Sits on a shelf maybe about a day, depending on delivery days. And we're at 90 proof, 45% ABV, Buffalo Trace. So we've got a distillery covered. We've got a wheated bourbon covered. And it's just an easy sipper. It's like a great starter bourbon. It allows you to talk about the effect that wheat grain has, I think, and it allows you to get a sweet profile for people. If they want to, try the lowest proof offering that you have, it's going to be sweet, approachable, candied, dark fruit. I think it makes some decent sense for that. Oh, Tommy D, I skipped over your comment. Where's the fireball? Oh, dude. All right, that was funny. All right. So, Weller Green Label, if I'm going to put this on a little tasting card, which is what we were going to do, I would say that this is a sweet bourbon, candied dark fruits with a medium short finish, with a little sweet oak on the back end. Like those are the general descriptors, and if you want to get even more general, you just say sweet, dark fruit, candied, short finish. Like those are the buzzwords I think for Weller Green Label. Now, a couple considerations as I start moving through these is that you can only have, in this case I'm pushing it with 6. Really, it should have been 5. So limited bottle selection, and also the more bottles you put out, the more bottles people think they need to taste, and the drunker they get. And you don't want people to get too hammered at these things, So limiting the bottles down. Again, I have to go with available and affordable whiskeys because of the ridiculous upcharge at the country club. And I'm also thinking about like discussion points with the bourbons. This is an hour-long event. And the full hour is not going to be me standing at the front of the room talking. These people are going to be mingling like a cocktail hour situation. I'm going to have some remarks up front, talk about nosing, tasting, the distillation process, bourbon in general. But there has to be discussion points around each individual bottle. And we have to cover a lot of bases. So, for me, the bases that this covers is we're introducing Buffalo Trace Distillery, really sought after. And also we can say, hey, in the state of Ohio, we get this bottle. A lot of people don't get this bottle. So it's a kind of a rare thing for others, but for us, we can get this thing. We can also start talking about the effect of secondary grains. Wheat. Why does wheat differ in this case? And it's the only wheater in the flight. So there's some discussion points there. Johnny 5, good call on ending the lineup with Knob Creek 12. Yeah, we'll talk about that for sure. Adam S., this is a good point. For a country club crowd, I might replace the Evan Williams with a little higher quality Heaven Hill product. Okay. Hold that thought, because I agree with you. Travis, I have not discussed the new Buffalo Trace Weeder. Can you guys remind me the name of that? I saw the announcement today on Instagram. I just don't give a crap about it. Frankly, they need to expand the stuff that they're already making. I know we have the distillery expansion. I know we have to wait years for these things to come of age. I get that. And this is probably something that is at least 6 years old. So it's been 6 years ago that they distilled this, I would think. So in that way, I'm not offended by them releasing another product that we're never going to find. But I think I just think it's annoying, optically. Just looking at the situation, you're like, people can't even find Weller Antique, and sometimes even the Green Label, and we're still releasing new wheated products. Why? And at 94 proof, Daniel Weller, but it's got a different kind of grain in there, right? A different kind of wheat. Yeah, and that's a good point. Weller Special Reserve, you can just talk about the word smooth. Exactly. So Jason says Four Roses is the most spring bourbon. Yes, and when I'm thinking about spring, like I said, fruity and I think floral. Fruity and floral and approachable and lower proof. All right. And Keith says I want to put in a port finish. That to me feels heavy, feels a little more fall, but I agree that it could be an interesting thing to talk about a finished whiskey. I think that's it's a good discussion point, but maybe a can of worms that you can't quite get to when you're thinking legacy distilleries, available bottles, etc. Angel's Envy would be the choice for that. I just don't think it's a quality enough whiskey to put in this flight. I think it's overhyped. All right. So next up on the list is what I figured would be kind of a tried and true offering. Number one, it's a household name, I think. If you know anything about bourbon, you've probably heard of Woodford Reserve. But also the timing of the Derby with this event being tomorrow. I thought this has got to be in there, right? It's also going to represent Brown-Forman in the landscape of this flight. And the flavor profile of Woodford Reserve, when you think Brown-Forman, you think, yeasty, fruity, banana. You think of some of those things. There's another pour in here that I think is a slight step up. 1792 small batch. It's not Brown-Forman, but that banana note, super fruity profile, and a teensy bit higher proof. It's a great connection to Woodford if you're thinking of flavor profile and bringing people through a progression. If they choose to get two pours, maybe if they like the Woodford, you say, hey, try the 1792 small batch next. You might like it even more. But the second pour in the flight is Woodford Reserve for those reasons, and it's only 0.4 proof higher than the Weller Special Reserve, right? We've gone to a ride bourbon at this point. We're off of the wheater, so there's a comparison to be made to talk about, and, obviously highly available. Wow, and there you go. I mean, it's just cherry. It's cherry, banana, that little yeastiness, little farmy thing, and a little spice thrown in. And a bit of like a coffee, slight bitterness that I think is kind of coming from that pot still that gets thrown in there. So, let's see. Was that on the... it was not on the list. That's right. So Scott says Russell's 10-year would be good in this lineup. I agree, Scott, but they actually, on their bourbon list, they do not have Russell's 10. So I felt like... I agree. Russell's 10 is one of my go-tos, but it was just not on there. So I wasn't able to select that. Adam says, old men at country clubs love their Woodford. I audit a beach club full of wealthy Woodford drinkers. People just love their Woodford. So having this as an option, as a go-to, they might see Weller. Some of them might gasp and be excited. They've heard things about the legendary Weller being Pappy Light. And some people aren't going to know anything about Weller. They're just only going to know Woodford Reserve as their starting point. So I figured we needed to have another starting point here, which is going to be the Woodford. And order-wise, these need to be reversed. Okay. Clay, the Eagle Rare, is actually not a part of this. Sorry. That was my opening pour for the flight. But you're right. The Sazerac, I suppose. But I think 1792 small batch is so far away from Weller Special Reserve flavor profile-wise, availability-wise. I don't consider them coming from the same place, even though they're both technically owned by Sazerac, at least in this flight. Travis says the Daniel Weller has Emmer wheat. Yeah, I mean, if you guys know things about grains, that might mean something to you. That means nothing to me. I'm not excited about the bottle. I don't care about it even a little bit. There's no age statement. It's 94 proof. It's another unobtainable thing, I would imagine. I don't care. Hate to be so blunt about that, but... All right. So there we go. First two in the flight. Keith, so tomorrow, because I am working with Makers as one of the pours, and I know a lot of people are going to purchase it because it's one of the cheapest ones on the list. I'm so upset that we weren't able to use these six pours for the flight. But again, the one that they've got, Woodford Rye, Buffalo Trace, Knob Creek, and Makers. I am going to talk about the note on Makers. I am. All right. Michael, spring equals love and procreation. So maybe a higher proof whiskey to accelerate the amour. I think this is an older demographic, so we might be beyond for a lot of them. I mean, I don't 100% know the crowd, but we might be beyond the window for that, let's say. Clay says, or Woodford and Old Forester 100 or Distillery Row series. Yeah, they didn't have a single Old Forester listed on their list here. Okay, so unfortunately, that's another issue. And you also mentioned Shaw bourbon can be used for more than neat mixing with ice. Oh, this is what you were talking about. Can you or will you discuss pairing with different types of bourbon with food? Maybe, but I'm not a big bourbon pairing person with stuff like that, like with charcuterie and all that. I don't enjoy pairing bourbon with it. One thing I did is there's this guy I know in town who's a private chef. I brought like 16 bottles to his house, and he just started cooking on the fly. He would taste a bourbon, and then he would just cook to it, something that he thought might pair with it. And then vice versa. He would cook the next dish in real time and be like, what's going to pair with this? And I had my choices, and we figured it out. And it was pretty cool. Like one thing, there was this kind of this kind of very fatty pasta. This pasta that had this type of sauce on it, and it just felt thick and fatty, no spice, because I don't think spicy things work very well with bourbon. And to me, I just thought E.H. Taylor. This is an E.H. Taylor single barrel pairing. Could be small batch, which is a little harsher, but the single barrel smooths things out a bit. This single barrel feels broad on the palate. It feels broad, but still a little thin, if that makes sense. And it's sweet, honey, those kinds of notes, dark fruit. And I thought the broadness of how it hits the palate would pair well with something that's similarly broad and a little bit fatty. And it worked. Like, it totally shocked me. But I actually prefer pairing with things like that, like substantial meals, than I do thinking about like cheese, nuts, fruit. I don't like that as much. I don't know why. Maybe I just need to do it a little bit more. But I certainly would talk about the fact that people could put ice, mix, whatever. And at an introductory bourbon tasting, my thought was everybody was going to have some water, and they could do the old trick of put a little water in your mouth, thin sip the bourbon if it feels too strong for you. No, I brought a lot of expensive stuff with this chef. We were just having fun and messing around. So we were doing like Chateau de la Baude. We paired. What did we pair? We had a peach, some sort of peach dessert that he whipped up, and we paired it with Chateau de la Baude, and it was crazy. I mean, it was because you're talking like this peach dish with Armagnac. Those flavors really interact well. Never mind me. You're fine, Clay. Just ran a pairing myself. Nice. What's up, Joe? At Lux Row, they pair bourbon with chocolate. That's about the only thing I like to do. John, I feel like getting some fat on the palate improves my tasting experience. I think so, too. And I think this is also why a lot of people talk about palate cleansers. Some people eat almonds. Some people do crackers and Munster cheese, which is kind of, it's got that broadness to it. I agree. Like, I think a little bit of fattiness on the palate helps. But I just, at all costs, for me, I avoid spice when I'm trying to have bourbon with a meal. So, like, I would never do, like, bourbon and pizza. I don't think that really works. I think there's a particular time and place for it. I would rather, in my mind, do wine with food. More generally, bourbon is a more specific experience. System trend, I would not buy a case of it, personally. I would buy 2 bottles, you know. I think it's good, but I think if you're going to shell out some money, you know, hunt the older batches. Or if you're involved in local, where you are, you know, buy, sell, trade type groups, get yourself a couple of 2019s, you know, C919, A119. I hesitate to buy a case of anything these days. Yeah, David, it was a really, really cool experience, and I need to hit him back up. Actually, he's texted me, and I need to respond to him. All right, so next up, I'll go back and try to catch up to the chat. Hit that like button, please, if you're here. Let's change the music. Let's go here. Next up in the tasting, the third option was going to be 1792 small batch. And this was coming in at 17 a pour. So the prices I was quoted, I believe it was 13, 12, 17. So this was a $17 pour at this country club, which is about as high. I mean, 20 is where I'm topping out for this event. And the interesting part about the event, because the bourbon tasting is only a segment of it, it's not the full focus of the event. People have to buy their pours. It's not like a pre-planned thing where they get 2 free pours or something. They have to buy them individually. So it's their choice what they buy, and it's their choice how many they buy if they're in the room with me doing the tasting. That creates issues for me because it segments the crowd a lot. So 1792 small batch, I threw this in there because I think 1792 small batch is extremely available, extremely affordable. It's a ridiculously beautiful presentation. People are going to love that at a country club in that setting. And I just think it hits above its price. Big flavors, super fruity. It's going to introduce more of that banana flavor, which to me feels kind of spring-like. Again, talking about a spring-themed flight. And a little higher proof, 93.7. Yeah, 93.7. So, on the nose, sweet oak right away. Banana. Kind of a strawberry / medicinal cherry. Great spice, great cinnamon on the palate. So this is going to wake some people up. Sweet and spicy. Shorter finish in the flavor category, but a longer finish in the spice category. All right, so there's a good amount to talk about here. And the relationships to the last two, which are, again, good discussion points for the mingling, for me working the room, in my mind was that it's owned by the parent company here, Sazerac, and flavor profile-wise, it's similar to Woodford in a lot of ways, and it's a step up in intensity. So I feel like here, if someone started with Weller, they could go next to the 1792. It's a great progression. Start with Woodford, they could go to the 1792. In the same way, it's a great progression. And I can also talk about, rye content being what it is here, 18% rye. We can start to talk about mash bills, wheated versus rye secondary grains. Johnny 5, so, this is not necessarily a country club crowd all the way. It's not members of the country club. The country club is just the host site for the event. The people coming to the event, it is a fundraising / donor / benefit type event. But it's still not going to be all like people that are loaded. I don't believe. I think a lot of people are just there to support the organization. So I wanted to keep that in mind for that reason. If I knew it was going to be people that were just checkbooks all day, that's a different story. But I feel like I want to maintain some integrity. If I'm the one selecting the pours and I know the prices and it's coming out of their pockets, I want to be able to say, I thought about this for you. I think that's important. All right. Oh, dude, pour some ECBP 920. Do it. Do it, do it, do it. Peer pressure. Clay says, I enjoy 1792 small batch. Excellent everyday bourbon. I agree. And I mean, it's not far off from the 12-year. I freaking love the 12-year. It's not far off. It's so related to that flavor-wise. It's like a 4-cylinder Honda, always dependable but not flashy. Totally agree. And I don't know how I missed out on it for years, thinking it wasn't good. Good point. I don't want to talk about this right now. Maybe later. Heaven Hill is dropping age statements on Elijah Craig barrel proof. We saw this coming, but it sucks. Joe, that's a great pickup, man. Oh, my God. Now, one last thing. Again, talking about discussion points with these whiskeys. Things that you could share with the group or share as you work the room. 1792 small batch is coming from Barton. This is a great opportunity to talk about how much whiskey is out there that's sourced from Barton. Now, there's no MGP in the flight. I felt like spring-themed Derby, we really need to stick pretty exclusively to Kentucky. But you can still get the point across of what sourced whiskey is by talking about Barton and talking about all the brands that use Barton in their whiskey. Whether it's the Kirkland stuff, which is super accessible, all the way up to fancy schmancy like Sam Houston's and Calumet Farm. Yeah, Bourbon Neophyte, thank you, man. Hit that like button. Yeah, please hit that like button, guys. Good to see you here, man. Jason, no, I'm putting them in order of proof and suggesting that they maybe start with, if they're new whiskey drinkers, start with one of these bottom two, Woodford or Weller Special Reserve, and then from there determine what they like or don't like about it to guide them in what they would order second or maybe third out of this last grouping. All right, so let's move on. Now, here's the thing. Here's the rub. On the list, there's no Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. So this is not technically one of my picks, but this is one of my hopeful picks. One of the things I wish I could have added to the list of pours. So really, remove this. It's these 5. The reason being, I felt like when we're talking about bourbon, if we're doing a tasting that is an hour long, where there's enough time to not only talk about the tasting itself, but to also, you have to fill some space. There's going to be mingled time, but you also got to fill space. An hour is a long time. There's got to be some history involved, even just a sprinkle of it. Yes, there are relationships between bottles, but in this case, I felt like having a Bottled in Bond product is really, really important. They do not have a Bottled in Bond product on their menu that is affordable, under $20 a pour, and like available, I guess, like they would have inventory of to do this tasting. So if I could, I would have added Evan Williams Bottled in Bond as a cheap option, but I couldn't because they didn't have that on their list at the bar. But I think it's important to talk about how things would be, cut with tobacco spit and all sorts of BS things in the bottles, and then we had this Bottled in Bond Act 1897 that shored up some of the shady stuff going on in the industry, and it became kind of this stamp of approval or stamp of legitimacy or quality in the industry. I think that's important to talk about at a tasting. You want to get the history in there. So I wasn't able to do it on this one, but this is the one I would have went with just because, again, thinking about availability, price, and representing a new distillery now in the series. Buffalo Trace, Woodford / Brown-Forman, Barton, Sazerac, Heaven Hill. So that would have been my choice 4. Mike, I did not figure out. I don't know anything about the Frank August still. Chris Stickles, what's up? Longtime lurker, usually end up watching the VODs. Well, thanks for jumping in here, man. You also live in Central Ohio. Cool. Very cool. So, Travis, yeah, the other choice here would be Elijah Craig 94 proof. There's also no rye in the flight. I thought about, they don't have Elijah Craig on their list. Now, I would imagine they have Elijah Craig. But if it's not on the list, I'm not at the country club looking through their thing. I have to go with what I'm given. But they do have Elijah Craig Rye. So I considered Elijah Craig Rye as an approachable rye whiskey. But, you know, I would have settled on the Evan Williams Bottled in Bond in a perfect world. Because, again, the Bottled in Bond, talking about the history behind it. So what you really want, I mean, and we'll see tomorrow. Like tomorrow I'm going to be basically riffing and improvising on the list that they have there, since they weren't able to do this. If you guys are just now jumping into the stream, this is the ideal list for the event that I'm doing tomorrow that fell through today. And now I have to do their list, which is Makers, Woodford Rye, Knob Creek, Buffalo Trace. Not bad whiskeys, but it's not a thought-through list that represents a lot of things where discussion points can come off of. But, yeah, I'm going to have to just roll with the punches on that. Chris, I'll talk about the Watershed Rye. If you're still here in a little bit when I'm done talking about this, remind me and I'll taste it. Excuse me. Okay. Stephen B. What do you mean there's no tobacco spit in bourbon anymore? Man, I'm done with this. Dang. So Jason, any wild turkey available? There is rare breed rye on their menu, and that's it. So I knew that someone was going to say there's no turkey involved here. Turkey 101. It's only one proof point higher than the last three on this menu. But I don't think it doesn't offer anything new to the tasting that these things don't bring. I mean, it's wild turkey. Flavor profile is different. But the reason I say that is because the next thing on the list is the Four Roses Single Barrel, which I think far and away an underrated whiskey. $45, $50 a bottle. It's a little pricey for some folks, but the proof is in the pour, as the BJs say. I think this is solid whiskey. And the thing I would talk about here with Four Roses Single Barrel, well, there's a lot you can talk about. The most important thing for me, not getting into the weeds, is to talk about what a single barrel is. That's a great jumping off point. That can lead to discussions about Blanton's relative to the Derby, which is happening. It can lead to a lot of things, but talking about single barrel versus small batch. We've already talked distillation. Very brief overview of distillation at the tasting. Now we can talk single barrel, right? And what that means. And this is the highest rye content so far in the flight with 35% rye. We could get into the different recipes, but it's not necessary. That's something very specific. Working the room, you find a table that's tasting the Four Roses Single Barrel, and you open that can of worms there. But for me, Four Roses Single Barrel, as you would expect, you're getting a lot of good cinnamon spice, which the Turkey 101 would have. You're getting floral notes, which it would have a little bit of as well. Kind of a red fruit note, a sweetness to it. So to me, this covers the ground that Turkey 101 would cover. Yes, it's more expensive, but you get more bang for your buck in discussion points with single barrel and with rye content, talking about how this extra rye adds this floral and spicy character to it. What a great whiskey. But I agree, Jason. Breaking the stigma of wild turkey is important. But there's not enough time. There's not enough pours to go around to have the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to move the Evan Williams aside just for a second, because this is really the flight that I designed without the Evan Williams. That was just a pipe dream because I don't have it on the menu. Chris, I haven't had a lot of experience with Four Roses Single Barrel to judge it that well. Yeah, the older bottles, I mean, this is kind of the case for all bourbon right now. Older bottles are going to be better. I have a Four Roses Single Barrel that's maybe a year older than this, maybe 18 months. Significantly better. But everything's trending that direction, so that's not the worst thing in the world. Scott, best Four Roses recipe. You know, I've not tried all of them. I really like OESK. My favorite bottle that I own of Four Roses is an OESQ, but I think it's just a really good run. It's a tier 6. It's a great run. TS85 6R is the bottle I have. It's the Bevmo OESQ pick. I think it's 9.5 years old. Just ridiculous whiskey. So the Four Roses single barrel, you start to challenge at a tasting. Let's say they started with the Woodford and then they go to the Four Roses single barrel. I mean, you're going to be challenging a novice or intermediate whiskey drinker's palate with the spice and the floral qualities of Four Roses. It's going to be a challenge. And that is about as much of a challenge intensity-wise and spice-wise that I would want to give a crowd when I'm doing a spring-themed bourbon tasting. If it's winter, fall, it's different. If it's summer, I might even be going lighter than this, depending, obviously, on the choices I have on the country club's menu to choose from. But, Scott, I hear things about OESV and OESO. I've had some of them. I think they're fine. I think Four Roses is much less about the recipe and more about the run. That's what it seems like to me. And I'm not the person that knows all of the runs. Some people know all of the great Four Roses runs. I'm not like that. Clay says, I think Four Roses small batch, if it was on their list, would be a good add right before the Four Roses single barrel. It was not on their list. Only the single barrel was on their list. Yeah, it's a weird list. It's a really weird list. All right. And last but not least, I have to admit, this is not necessarily a spring-themed bourbon. If you guys can convince me or point out anything about this that you think is spring-themed, please do. Because I would love to use it in a future tasting. I wish I could use it tomorrow if I was able to use these bottles. But I put Knob Creek 12 in this flight because... Excuse me. I put it in this flight because I think it is still one of the most underrated whiskeys on the market. It is possibly the best year-round whiskey, like with some age on it, with a decent bit of proof at 100, from a legacy distillery. Like, this might be the GOAT of those things being produced today. I know we're going to say Elijah Craig barrel proof. It's the same price, $70. Or maybe this is 60 and that's 70 now. Let's call them the same. I don't even care. Elijah Craig barrel proof is 3 times a year. It's a little harder to find. Knob Creek 12 year, every day of the week. I don't think it's a spring flavored thing. This is heavy leather, heavy, funky, sour oak. But the point for me in this tasting was to show different things, different profiles. I've covered Buffalo Trace, let's just say Brown-Forman in its entirety here. It's the best I could do, the Woodford and the Derby theme. We've got Barton, which is great, underrated. I want to highlight underrated and available. Four Roses, really talking about spring here, really challenging the palate. And now the Knob Creek, we're representing Jim Beam. I don't think there's another Jim Beam bottle that I would throw in this flight besides possibly Old Granddad Bottled in Bond, which I'm not a fan of, but it's a great way to talk about Bottled in Bond. It's a great way to talk about Jim Beam, etc., etc. High rye content also. Little floral character similar to the Four Roses. That could be an option for this last bottle. But I just thought, let's go all out on this. Let's go Knob Creek 12 year. That's so good. And then you can talk about oak. You can talk about barrel influence. And the fact that most of these whiskeys right here are probably like 6 to 8 years old at best. And this is age stated at 12 years. You can then talk about age statements. You can talk about the law of minimum whiskey in the blend, minimum aged whiskey. I don't know. Last but not least, as a thing that they do for all the tastings at this country club, they include 2 very special bottles in their tastings. That's not my thing. It's not my choice. They include Old Rip 10, I think 30 a pour, and they include Pappy 20 at 60 a pour. Those might be half-ounce pours, though. I can't remember. So Old Rip 10 and Pappy 20 were coming along no matter what. What does that mean for me selecting these 5 bourbons? Well, it means that we can talk Weller to Pappy and the relationship there. The barrel selection that Pappy gets, the fact that it's aged in a specific part, of the Buffalo Trace campus, and those barrels are selected for Pappy. But the fact that it's essentially Weller and the relationship that people talk about those things, and the hype that has surrounded those over the last 10 to 15 years in the industry. So there's plenty of places to go there. So that was my idea for this. What do you guys think? Like, is this representative? Is the fact that, the Evan Williams is not technically here, it's not actually in here, do these 5 bourbons represent a flight that's titled Welcome to Spring? Do these represent a welcome to spring? Do they cover enough ground within bourbon, Kentucky bourbon specifically? Does this do the trick, or is there something in here that you would swap out? I know people wanted turkey. I know bottled and bond would be great, but the list didn't have it. Things that were at least readily accessible to do it. How do you think this would be for that list? Yes, yeah, Knob Creek products are the second best value in bourbon behind ECBP. I agree. Angel's Envy for something approachable like Kentucky. What makes a bourbon and what does not? Michael, I really thought about the Angel's Envy. I really, really did. And if I swapped out anything for the Angel's Envy, I think it would be the Weller. I think the Weller would go and the Angel's Envy would come in. You can talk port finish. It's lower proof. It's like 80. It's like 86.8. I can't remember Angel's Envy's proof, but it's lower. You can talk about, port finish. You can talk about the lower proof, all that kind of stuff. The Weller for regular Buffalo Trace is a good choice too, Peter. Definitely a good choice. Joe, absolutely no makers. Not for me. No, I will be working with makers tomorrow with the pours that, again, if you're just now jumping in, they mixed it up on me the day before the thing, and I can no longer use these bottles. I have to use the things that they normally use for their events, which absolutely sucks. So, makers, Woodford Rye, Woodford Bourbon, Buffalo Trace, Knob Creek 9. Patrick, Rebel 100. Rebel was not on the list. Maybe a good choice, but I think Weeded and 100 proof, those things are covered within this flight, I think. Jason would prefer Knob Creek 12 over Pappy. I would disagree. Well, I've only tried Pappy 15, but I would disagree with you on that with the Pappy 15 at least. I've never had the 20 or the 10. And I know the 10 is not Pappy. I know. Granddad 114, Scott. I wonder if that could fit in here for a spring themed flight. It could be the final pour though. But it's discussion-wise, history-wise, it's not necessarily offering something that's like an age statement like the Knob Creek does. You could talk about age statements. It is high rye, 27% rye, so a little lower than the Four Roses. The highest proof, there is a progression there. I don't know. What's up, Mark Vasco? So Joe just opened up the Old Carter Batch 14 bourbon he's had on a shelf. It was a long week. Is that the one that people were like hyping up? I'm drinking Knob Creek 12. That's what I'm drinking. John Seppi says, regardless of what bottles you have to work with tomorrow, a good talking point would be profile differences between distilleries. Yeah, I think, tomorrow given the circumstances, given the fact that things have been so, to put it politely, fluid, over the last day or so. I'm gonna be riffing. I doing these things on live streams, I think is going, and I'm on stage for a living playing music. I think all of these things are going to help me when it comes to riffing on a bourbon tasting. But I think you're right that something that's going to come up between Maker's Mark, Woodford, Brown-Forman maybe more generally, Buffalo Trace, and Knob Creek, those are 4 distinct profiles between those distilleries and parent companies. So I think you're right that I'm going to be able to talk about that, assuming most people in the room grab 2 pours, maybe a third. They're going to be able to experience that as well. And I'm going to suggest, there's Woodford and Woodford Rye. I understand the side-by-side could be cool for them to taste the barely legal rye. I think it's barely legal versus the bourbon, but I don't think that's as productive as let's taste distilleries. And that's what I hate about this list. Of all the ryes to pick, they picked Woodford Rye. What a random rye. I think the reason they did it is because it has the Woodford name attached to it. People might be adventurous and try it, but I still think it's an odd choice. JG, you call that music. Hey, man. Everything's music if there's an audience. Yeah, are you Slammer? Don't mention the MSRP since they're paying $16 a pour. Joe, Woodford Rye is it's not important. I'm sorry, it's just not important. Jack Daniel's Single Barrel. So the only thing they had on their list for me to work with, the country club here that's hosting, was the Eric Church Single Barrel, and I am gonna imagine that that's not gonna be a cheap price per pour. Try to say that 3 times fast. So I didn't even ask about it because I just figured there's no way. And it's not very productive to throw that into a flight and people can't go out and buy a bottle. There's some sexiness to the fact that it's the Eric Church thing. And if anybody in the room likes Eric Church, you could, this is a cool thing. But at the end of the day, for the general audience in the room, it means less. Joe, this isn't Dublin. Yeah. This isn't Dublin. You know where I'm talking then, yeah. All right, so let's get these out of the way. Chris. Is Chris still here? Chris, your last name's Stickles, correct? Yes, Chris Stickles. Chris, let me know if you're still here, man. I'm going to move these out of the way. Thank you guys for, what's the word? I don't know. Allowing me to share with you my thoughts, as it pertains to putting this flight together. Even though I'm not able to do it the way that I originally planned, I think it's still going to be a good time tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little bummed, but, life is all about flexibility. Making the most out of the situation. Yeah, Chris, Michter's, they have no Michter's on there. Yeah. It's crazy. They have things, they have a Larceny barrel proof, but I don't think that's as impressive. They have Elijah Craig barrel proof, but I just thought for spring and for an audience it's mostly novice whiskey drinkers, there's no reason to put Elijah Craig barrel proof in a flight. It seems like a lot. The other thing that guys that I didn't mention is that this country club does have their own Eagle Rare pick and their own Blanton's pick. The Blanton's pick in particular would be of interest because of the Derby relationship to spring. It's happening, right now, essentially. But it's 20 a pour, and I'm not going to be able to taste it before the event happens. And I don't want to serve something that I don't know how it tastes. And I don't know who's picking these barrels. I don't know who picked the Blantons and the Eagle Rare barrel. The Eagle Rare is probably a better chance that the Eagle Rare is going to be good because it's it has a 10-year age statement. The Blanton's doesn't have an age statement, and I've had god-awful Blantons recently. The stuff coming out of Buffalo Trace that they're calling Blantons these days over the last year is atrocious. It tastes like Benchmark, unless you get a store pick and somebody knows what they're doing and they get access to some higher aged barrels. So I'm not trusting the Blanton's pick. That could have been the final pour in the flight besides Knob Creek 12. That means there's a lot of Buffalo Trace, especially with their addition of Old Rip 10, Pappy 20. It's just a lot of Buffalo Trace. I'm not here to hype Buffalo Trace. I'm here to anti-hype Buffalo Trace. Yeah, Mark, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof would overwhelm the newbies. I think so too. Yeah, Jay, but it has a horsey top. You're right. So, Jeff, the thing is, man, this is we're talking Ohio, a control state. We're talking a country club with a beverage director who was not particularly kind to me today when I met with him. That's as much as I can say about that. But he is the reason that I have to, well, not the only reason, but a big part of the reason I have to change up from the flight that I planned and discussed with you guys just now to doing their standard pours for events in the venue. So there's no way I could bring my own bottles in there to share with folks because, you know, in Ohio, those guys could get into some trouble for having me do that. Now, what I am going to do, I am going to bring some glassware with me to just demonstrate different kinds of bourbon tasting glasses, talk about the effect they have on the whiskey. People aren't going to be able to demo that with me. I just don't have enough glassware to bring. I can't do that. But we can talk about it, and I am going to bring maybe a few bottles as examples. Like I might bring a 1980s old Grandad and just show like a tax strip, like just show what a tax strip looks like for a bottled and bond product. Joe, sounds like you know these folks, man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who picked it. But yeah, I don't want to harp on the beverage director thing. I mean, look, the guy didn't know me. There was a lot of miscommunications behind the scenes with the organization I'm working with for this event and the country club. There was just a lot of just shoddy communication, and it's not like one person's fault. It's just a lot of people not knowing what's going on, and I tried to figure it out today at the last minute, and the beverage director just shut it down very, very quick. Joe, did you really make those names up, dude? Carlton, Briggs, Brock, Sutton, Stanford, Cooper, or Weston. Jay, did you show him the belt? Oh my God. Yeah, Jason, it's a little complex. I don't want to go into the details, but I'm scrolling back in the chat now, just so you guys know. Yeah, if you guys are just now jumping in here, please hit that like button if you don't mind. Stephen B. from earlier, 10 minutes ago, spring bourbons or summer bourbons are a hard pick. I agree. To me, when I go spring, I go Scotch. Oban. I love Oban. I love Glen Grant in particular for springtime. Glen Scotia is good too. Springbank might be a little funky, but I always love some Springbank. Aaron, great stuff. Can't go wrong with the standards. Glenmorangie, Glenlivet, Glenfiddich. But I tend to go other places for spring. Jeff, that's the goal, man. It's just like give these people a good time. interact. I think the important thing now that the event is a little bit up in the air and the pours aren't what I had originally hoped. I think the important thing is give some opening remarks in the beginning about, my experience. Like, the event is kind of music related, so talk about my experience as a musician with bourbon, the maybe creative relationship between the two, and then get into very quickly, I need to get these people served. They need to pick what they want. So I have to go through the 5 pours that they have available to them fast. Like, here's what you're going to get from all 5 of these pours. Pick your first one. And then once we're tasting along together, I'm going to try to guide the group as a unit, even though they're tasting 5 different whiskeys, and they can select their next one from there. Talk about distillation a little bit up front, impact of barrel, some general bourbon things, and then work the room. As I'm working the room, people would hopefully be getting their second pours, maybe third pours, and then come back at the end, ask like some general questions like, what did you guys find by doing this? Like, what did you possibly learn, or what intrigued you? What do you have questions about? Do that at the end of the hour, maybe in the last 10 minutes, and then bring them back into the main room for the silent auction, which is what's going to follow. Joe, oddly, no one had to drink bullshit non-bourbons last night on Matt Madness. I know. Actually, I don't think there was a... You guys tell me, was there a hardcore question last night? Keith says the UFC card is a little rough tonight. Dude, I gotta get that on here soon. Keith, what's going on, man? Is it a night full of, like, decisions? If it's a bunch of decisions, I have a hard time going back and doing the rewatch, unless it's like a big name fight. What I'll usually do is watch the co-main, the main event. If there's another big name I want to see on the main card, regardless if it's a decision or not, but then I'll just see where the finishes were, watch the fights that had the finishes, and then call it a day. There was no hardcore last night, which is crazy. Come on, Matt. You got to put a hardcore in there. Be consistent. I'm just kidding, Matt. Matt knows I love him. I was texting Matt today. But one thing, man. Guys got to open their boxes on the stream. I'm just going to say that, and that's all I'm going to say. People need to open their boxes on the stream for Matt Madness. Moving on. Oh, it was supposed to be a shot of tequila beforehand. Well, Matt could have He could have said, someone choose a bottle, triple it, which is treacherous. From firsthand experience, I'll say that's treacherous. All right, so Chris Stickles, if you're still here, let me grab that. And Mark Vasco, you're here. So I would imagine maybe Christine's here too, but I don't know. Let me grab that Watershed Rye and let me taste that. So this is going to be for, the Ohio folks in chat. Yeah, Keith, I know the card tonight in terms of these two fights. But what's making it rough? You said it's a rough card. What's making it rough? Oh, Jay, man. Oh, no, I don't think Matt had any malicious intent. I think the hardcore thing is just entertainment value and adding a little chaos, which is cool. Yeah, Mark, I'm going to do a little pour of this Watershed Rye. I know Christine's been asking about it. I feel bad that she's in bed. But Chris was asking about it as well, so I'm going to taste it right now. Mark, dude, it was so good to see you. I want to say a couple weeks ago. That was probably a couple months ago now. Time is just flying. It was so good to see you guys. those are the best things. Like people, just random get-togethers and meetups, and like, can you tell I don't get out very much? It's just music and whiskey and trying to get enough sleep and trying to see my wife, who I miss dearly. I like, Sarah and I are like texting each other, I miss you. And it's like we live under the same roof and we never see each other. I hate it. All right. Anyways, I don't want to get all sappy here. Joe, have you had the 2023? No, I have not had that yet. So Joe, I've been actually selling off like in a local buy sell trade group. I've been selling off tons and tons of whiskey recently. You know, Sarah and I are looking at, in the next year, 18 months, maybe 2 years, getting a house built. And so for me, it's like, man, I've got thousands and thousands of dollars of whiskey in the bunker unopened, and I've got a bunch of open bottles that I never touch out of like the 500 or 600 here that are open. It's time to start getting rid of some things. Let's make the move easier when it happens, and let's recoup some of the money, and, you know, pay some things off as we look to the future. So for me, like, I'm kind of putting a hold on buying anything on secondary unless it's really meaningful or just like extremely relevant, I guess. And like the Michter's 10, another year of that being released, it's not as relevant for me. Damn, Jay, you went hard, dude. Sarah texted me the same thing. David said you should do a stream with the missus. David, I would love that. She would love that too, actually. But Sarah's the kind of person that when she comes on a stream, and I understand this, she wants to come on with a purpose, not just to be there and hang, because I think she feels like Drums and Drams is my thing, and if she's going to be a part of it, it needs to be like a game or a theme or something for her to jump on. And I understand that mindset. I'm that way with a lot of things myself. So I guess we need to find a thing to do together on here, you know. I like when she's on here. It's kind of funny because in social situations, Sarah is the one, like I would say we're both extroverted. Since COVID happened, I've become definitely more introverted. I had a hard time socially, like coming out of COVID, going back to social events, not because I was scared of COVID. It's because like I just wasn't around people. So then I got around people again, and I was like kind of weird. I was like socially awkward. But in social situations, Sarah is usually like the life of the party when it's her and I. And I take a back seat to that because it's weird to compete with your wife. You know what I mean? Like we're both high energy, but we don't do well necessarily feeding off of each other in social situations where we're together. So it's like I take a back seat and she leads the charge. But on Drums and Drams, I lead the charge and she takes a back seat, and it's kind of weird. So she likes to have a reason to come on. Jason says, theme equals trash, Cam. That's what the junkies did with their wives. Interesting, Jason. And it makes sense because, again, it could be the same situation where they're like, well, if we come on, maybe we want to have something to... instead of basing it on our interactions, we base it on a game. It makes sense. All right, so let's get into this Watershed. This is a 6-year rye, won in a lottery in Columbus. It was not cheap. Mark, I don't know if you remember how much we paid for these, but let me know if you do remember. I want to say 100, maybe. It is 100% distilled, aged, and bottled on site. I don't have the mash bill here, but I think it's a lot of rye, if not 100%. I think it's a lot of rye. All right. Strong ethanol note coming off the top. But, yeah, good, like big spice notes, big ethanol, but you can smell like honey like Honey Nut Cheerios kind of grain sweetness. Yeah, kind of like a little lemon oil and vanilla. Yeah, light, crispy caramel type notes. Mark says, I think they were 80. Mark Vasco, the Watershed Rye has a bit of the acetone, dude. That's a great. That's spot on. Like the lemon oil thing and the ethanol for me, that is exactly it. Acetone rye. Grassy sweetness, yeah. Good call, man. It's almost, you know what, Mark? It's almost a little bit Irish to me. It's almost got a little Irish, like redbreast cask strength thing going on here. It stings the nostrils, man. It's man, it's strong. It's really strong. But that yeah, Mark, like the grassiness, I think the things that are triple distilled like that tend to get a little green for me. Joe, it's kind of both. It's kind of like vegetal grassy green, but biscuity in the sense that there's that grain sweetness to it. To me, this is like Powers did the Powers Rye, and it's almost like if Powers Rye was barrel proof. In my head, that's what this would be. All right, Jason Nightman, thanks for jumping in here. Now on the back end, Mark, I have not gotten this before on this pour. If you let this sit, like don't take another sip for maybe a minute or two. I don't know when I took my last sip. It's like burnt coffee. Not just coffee bitterness. It's like very heavily burnt coffee on the finish. That's maybe even more than burnt. It might be like burnt bread. But it's not like that on the front of the palate at all. Michael S. That's the Anchorman quote, right? About, what is it called? Sex Panther? Oh, God, I'm typing Sex Panther into Google. That's dangerous. If I'm wrong, that's dangerous. No, it's Sex Panther. Wow, Mark, yeah. That's actually, to me, the most interesting part of this whiskey is the finish with that burnt note. Wow. That makes me like it a lot more. I'm going to throw some water in it, though, because I feel like it's just so alcohol forward. Oh, that might have been too much water. Night, Clay. Thanks for jumping in here, man. The Heaven Hill 6 here finally won the battle. You fought valiantly. So, Mark, if you throw a little water in this, it actually brings out some milk chocolate, which is something, and this was a decent bit of water, but it brings out milk chocolate, which to me is possibly related to that burnt note in the finish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, it tastes like a lemon tart now. Whoa, dude. I'm telling you, I probably put, like, let's say this pour was 20 milliliters. I probably put 10 milliliters of water in it, 10 to 12. I put a good bit of water. Put a good bit of water in that, dude. Oh my God, Mark. It got so lemony on the mid palate. Wow. Yeah, Chris, it's a unique pour. I can't say I prefer this. I think if I was outside, like today I mowed the lawn. To me, if I drank this after mowing the lawn and like, you know, weeding and all this kind of stuff, I'm sweaty, whatever. Drinking this outside, maybe over ice, maybe chilled, maybe none of those things. This feels fitting for that with the, you know, the grassiness in the air, being outside. It's not something that I'm going to go to every day though. So I wouldn't be bummed that you missed out on it. And Chris, if you want a 100 milliliter flask of this stuff, man, send me an email, drumsanddrams@gmail.com. Get in touch with me. I'll give you 100 mils of this. Not because it's bad. I think it's unique. It's worth exploring. And if you want to taste it, if you want to, you know, get into this, have enough to explore, just let me know, man. You're in Columbus. We can arrange to get you some of this stuff. Wow. That's a lot. All right. I have unfortunately not been drinking any water. Yeah, it's been kind of sad selling Michael S. Yes, Mark, like a limoncello. Totally with you, man. I agree that Watershed is a little pricey. Like, the best value, if you're going to go to Watershed and do anything, the best value is to go into the gift shop and buy a cask strength single barrel. And I have one of, I have one of those. I actually have two. They ended up changing the labels here. So this is, I think, an older label. This was picked by Whiskey Business. You know, whoever that is. Whiskey Business. Might be like a podcast or something. It was in the gift shop. And then this one is it's called Secret Stash. And it's the staff pick. Now, what I've noticed with the Watershed single barrels, for those of you guys who live in Columbus, is that the lower proof single barrel picks are better. The higher proof ones, the whiskey's not old enough to, in my opinion, handle that. And when you throw water in it and try to bring it down, it doesn't do what you want it to do. So for me, I had a few more of these before and I've traded them off or sold them locally. This Whiskey Business pick, it's 59.5%. These things go over 70 with Watershed. So 59.5 is low. I think these are the best picks that they do. And it's the truest representation of the distillery because most of their common products on the shelf these days are like blended with apple brandy finished bourbon, which is not a true representation of the whiskey. This Whiskey Business pick is incredible. It's incredible. It's just strawberry candy. Yeah, it's a little rough around the edges, but Secret Stash, a little more intense. That was 59.5. This one is 63. Yeah. And it's fine, but it's not as good. So look out for those lower proof picks if you go into the gift shop. Chris, thankfully, I do know that this is not the old mash bill with spelt in it. The spelt stuff was not good. And the rye, the 6-year rye that I just tasted has a little bit of that profile to it, like of the old mash bill, which I don't think is very good. They also released a Pinot Noir and a Zinfandel finish. I didn't confirm this, but I'm 95% sure that's the old mash bill that's been put under those finishing barrels. Given the time frame, also given the profile, which is a little farmy, crafty tasting. The current Watershed stuff, like this Whiskey Business pick from Watershed, if you scale this up 6 more years in the barrel, I think this competes with any legacy Kentucky distillery. I really do. It has insane aging potential to it. Like it feels to me almost like a slightly more candied, sweet Four Roses. So in my mind, it's almost like a combination of Four Roses and Buffalo Trace. It's just young. And I think if you take this 6 to 8 years into the future, it's going to be ridiculous. Yeah. Mark, the Nocino is really, really good. Yeah, and the Burchino is what Sarah and I make Manhattans. I'll tell you guys this. The best Manhattan that we have found is if we take Calumet. This is an expensive Manhattan. But if you take Calumet Farm 16 and if you throw in a little bit of rye whiskey, like quality rye, something barrel proof, MGP 8-year, or I don't know, something with some spiciness to it. But take like 1.75 ounces or maybe 1.5 of Calumet 16 and get up to 2 ounces by adding in the rye whiskey component. So just adding a little bit of that spiciness to it, whether it's 1.75 Calumet or 1.5. Finish it off up to 2 ounces with some rye, high quality, high proof. Then throw in, you don't need much, half an ounce at most of the Burchino. Shake it with ice. I throw in a little bit of Luxardo cherry juice, a couple drops of bitters. I shake it up. That makes a great Manhattan. Jay, no vermouth, because we basically sub the vermouth for this Burchino, which is this thing that Watershed makes, this black walnut liqueur. So it's not necessarily a Manhattan all the way, but it's cool. Very, very good. We were, during COVID, man, we were crushing those. We were going through Calumet 16 like this. Chris, let's see. If you haven't checked out M&O Spirits, I've had M&O at the Ohio, what did they call that? It was like the Ohio Distillers Festival, the first year that they did the Ohio Distillers thing with the collaboration bottle. I think I had M&O there. Really good for an extremely small operation down in Asheville. One thing I would like to do one of these years, I guess, is to make it a point to set a number of Ohio distilleries to go and visit. 10, 15. Go and go visit them and kind of log the results or take note of it, or maybe even make a short video while I'm there. Whatever. Chris, yeah, man. Let's meet up. So I'm notoriously bad with these things. So again, shoot me an email, drumsanddrams@gmail.com. I have a very big career thing happening in July that I have to prep for starting right now. It could be before then, but most likely I'm not going to do anything social until after July 7. After that, I'm an open book. But shoot me an email anyways, and we'll chat about all that. Yeah, Michael says it's not a Manhattan, it's a Columbus. Not so PC of a name to catch it. Mark, I did see the Frey Ranch hit at Arena Wine and Spirits downtown. Brendan says, don't shake Manhattans. Buy a mixing glass and a bar spoon. Don't want to overdo. See, I don't know anything about cocktails, Brendan, so that's good advice. The one thing I would say, I'm not defending myself, but to defend the way that we did it, is that we were using 100 and... What's Calumet 16? 106 proof? Maybe? Yeah. We were using 106 proof Calumet. The vermouth substitute was higher proof. And the rye whiskey that I was throwing in, I think I was putting in 114 proof rye. So it could handle a little more dilution maybe than the average Manhattan, but I think that's a good point. It's good to know. I'll have to do that. Yeah, Mark, I have an old bottling of their rye whiskey that Paul Graham sent like 2 years ago. And it's good. It's got that aged cheese note, like Gouda cheese, which is a weird one, but it's fine. I'd love to try a single barrel proof pick of their rye. And I'm sure it's older now. But yeah, I did see it at Arena. Just a bartender here trying to help out. No, man, that's good. That's good advice. So Joe says, this sounds like the time my wife made a banana stand. Old Forester 100 plus banana liqueur plus some other BS. Oh, also she used... Old Forester birthday bourbon from 2013 as a sub for Old Forester 100. I'm sorry, man. So how long ago was this? Because if you recently had a bottle of Old Forester birthday bourbon from 2013, I envy you. Knob Creek 12. During COVID. Wow. I mean, that's at least 7 years after the release of that Old Forester birthday bourbon. How did you have that? The only Old Forester birthday bourbon I've ever tried was the sample that Matt Porter sent me of the 2012. And I thought it was like all time for me. Now that was 2020. I was relatively new to American whiskey, but still, I thought it was great. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Gotta mute the mic and be polite. All right, JG throwing out some excellent cocktail content. Anders Eriksson on YouTube. And someone else said, Michael says, Steve the bartender. All right, Mark, if you're looking for a Frey Ranch rye single barrel proof pick, you might want to message Bubble Bath. He can get those from time to time. Awesome. I will have to shoot him a message. That's awesome. Yeah, the bourbons, I would love to try the bourbons nowadays. The one I have is like, I think it's 2.5 years old or something. It's not an old bourbon, but it has a lot of potential. And I know they're taking off these days and people are spending a lot of money on secondary for these things. All right, guys. It's been an hour and 45 minutes. Thank you for hanging out tonight. Thanks for letting me ramble to you about what I hoped would be the flight of bourbons that I'm going to be tasting with this group tomorrow at this event. But nonetheless, I'm going to be getting into some makers with them, getting into Woodford, Knob Creek 9-year single barrel, Buffalo Trace, all the goodies, the standards. Is there anything else? Anything I didn't cover tonight? Any, I don't know, quick reviews or quick... Excuse me, I got the bourbon belches. Not good. Any quick reviews or maybe one quick comparison you'd want to see before I jump off? So what we have tomorrow is we have I have an orchestra concert at 2 p.m. We have like a matinee show, which is pretty rare for us. We don't do very many of those. So I've got a matinee, and then I have to drive straight to this country club for the event. I'm going to come home and change out of my my tails, my white tie for the concert. Actually, I think because it's a matinee, I think I'm going to wear something else. I think on matinees we wear just regular tuxes, not full tails, but still. So I'll come home, change my clothes, go to this event. I'm going to wear a floral tie. I think I'm going to wear a floral tie, make it kind of spring-like. Even though the flight is no longer spring themed, I think I'm going to still look very springy. Anything else? I'd like to have one final pour of something solid. What's it going to be? Old Fitz 15, maybe? Old Fitz 15 sounds good. Evan Williams. You know what? Let me do this. Joe mentioned Michter's 10 earlier. Gandy Road says, heading to the beach. Any recommendations for beach bourbon? Barrel Seagrass, beach bourbon. Well, that's a beach rye, beach finished rye. What do you guys got for beach bourbons? Let's say beach American whiskeys. I'm gonna go Barrel Seagrass. I'm gonna go Buffalo Trace. Wild Turkey. Why does Wild Turkey sound correct? But 101, it seems intense for the beach, unless it's over ice. Michter's single barrel rye, like the Shelfer. I think the Shelf rye from Michter's would be good. Michter's American also would be good. Hell, look. Any Michter's standard product, maybe not the bourbon because it's kind of coffee heavy, dark chocolate, but the American Vanilla Bomb, the rye is banana sweet, and the sour mash is really good. Mellow corn, that's actually not bad. But seagrass, I'm telling you, go to the beach and drink seagrass. I think that's like the number one thing. All right, so let's do a little Michter's. Let's just kill this bottle. This is my favorite Michter's 10 single barrel I've ever had from 2021. And thankfully, I have a backup bottle of this exact barrel. And it's one of those bottles that even though I'm selling off a lot of my stuff currently, I will not sell my backup of this because I really like it. Toshi, what's up, man? I'm going to turn UFC on here in just a second. Thank you for the $20 super chat, man. Just jumping on, sadly watching the Warriors lose. Yeah, I'm not following the NBA this year, but interesting. It's 1-1 right now. Watching UFC, but I wanted to say what's up. Hope you're good, man. Samples coming to you soon. Thank you, dude. Man, no pressure. And I got your message. I'm sorry I didn't respond to your Facebook message. Dude, life gets busy. The fact that you're sending me anything, and then on top of that, the fact that you're sending me the things that you're sending me, I cannot say thank you enough, man. 2010 George T. Stagg, come on. And I do still have a little bit of the 09 left to compare it to. So that's going to have to be a video. Go Aljamain? No, man. I'm Team Cejudo. I don't like Cejudo. I think he is the king of cringe, like he says. But I don't think Aljamain. I just don't agree with the decision. I don't agree. There's just so much I don't agree with in his last fights to get to where he is now. He's a good fighter, and he could be the best in the division. But the decision, the illegal knee thing, like just everything that's led up to this, I don't like it. I don't like all of it. So Triple C is cringy, dude. And I can't, it's actually, I turn it off when he's doing his dumb shit, but I think he's better than Aljo. I don't like Aljo, man. I think he got all these like illegitimate wins and then realized he had to hype it. And then he's become like confident, but I don't think I think he's fake confident based on illegitimate wins, but he has to be that way to convince himself that he can win against Cejudo. Well, and the other thing is, like, I'm also thinking about Jan a little bit more broadly than just the Aljamain fight. Like, the fact that Jan got beat by Sean O'Malley, I think is so wrong. I think that's just UFC going to bat for their boy. And I think that also influences my opinion of Aljo, because Jan was not only wronged, with O'Malley, but also just everything that's happened with Aljo. I just think Jan has gotten a bad shake. Brian, yeah, I am getting rid of some of my stuff, man. At this point, I've gotten rid of most of what I'm going to be getting rid of. It happened over the last 2 weeks, but, kind of sucks to get rid of so many things, but also it's good for Sarah and I moving forward, looking to have a house built and everything like that. Yeah, so Toshi, I think that O'Malley fight really clouds my judgment with Aljo, just because everything there in the division so, like, related, so interconnected. I have a hard time separating those things. Yeah, Joe, mostly getting rid of opens. Joe, I'm getting rid of I have 2 backups of Chateau de la Baude, batch 1. I'm getting rid of one of those. Michter's 10 Rye 2021, which is a great year for those, in my opinion. Those 2 things I have left. Yeah, I think that's it. It's just like a Michter's 2021 Rye and a Chateau de la Baude batch 1, which pains me. But it's just such a valuable bottle. Got to do it. All right. Oh, this Michter's 10 is so good. It's King of Kentucky Light. Oh. Man. What a great barrel. I'm trying to balance, in my bunker. I don't know if you guys do this. I'm trying to balance having, like, ridiculous bottles. Like, I have a backup of an old Granddad 1989 114. My Chateau de la Baudes, I have, some Magnus cigar blends. I have probably 10 Elijah Craig barrel proofs from older years, including an extra batch 11. Bardstown Apple Brandy finish, Bardstown Discovery 3, some single barrels that are really good from Knob Creek and other places. It's like, I'm trying to balance, do I keep quantity of really good bottles, or do I keep $5,000 bottles in the bunker, like Chateau, like the 89 Granddad? Like, what does the balance look like? The answer is somewhere between. That's why it's hard to figure out what to do with it. Toshi, it's not sold, man. I can talk. We'll talk. Scott mentioned it. Joe, so Chateau went up to about 1,000. And I'm not here. Like, for anybody watching, this is not a channel where I try to sell my bottles to people. This is just a topic that's coming up right now, given the circumstances. But the value of Chateau went up at one point to 1,000. It has since dropped to I want to say it's about 850 now. So, it's around that 800 to 900, I would say, is where it's sitting. I have a very special connection to that bottle. It's the first bottle I ever spent real money on in whiskey. I fell in love with it. It made me fall in love with whiskey, like with American whiskey. I could not believe it. So to get rid of it, I'm still not even convinced that I'm going to get rid of it, but we'll see. Yeah, Joe, it's like, exactly, man. Because, like, I could just get rid of, like, 2 cigar blends and 2 older Elijah Craig barrel proofs instead of the Chateau. And I should probably just do that. But the cigar blends are apparently good batches. I don't know, man. I have a hard time. So, I don't know. I'm not sold on the chateau yet, but we'll see. Sarah, you know, family comes first, and I got to do what I got to do. And we got, you know, I just want to get into we're renting this pretty crappy house right now, and it's like I'd like to get into a real place. Jay, you are killing it tonight, man. All right. I'm going to get off here, and I'm going to turn on the UFC legally. Yeah, Toshi, it's just for the down payment, you know? Although at this point, with the way things are going, it's like, you don't really need to do a crazy down payment on houses because, you know, cash in hand is better right now. Anyways. Toshi says you buy, or Joe says you buy into the country. No. No, we're looking to have a place built a little south of us right now, south of downtown. Yeah, Toshi, you are correct, man. Not good. All right, guys, that's it. Final sip, Michter's 10. I got to turn on the UFC. I got to catch the co-main and the main, I hope. I don't think the co-main has probably started. It's 11:30. It should be starting right about now. I'll see you Thursday night, but, well, okay, 86% chance I'm on Thursday night late. 10 p.m. would be the earliest I would start. I wouldn't start any later than 10:30. If it's going to be later than a 10:30 start, I would just not do the stream because I don't want to do that. But keep an eye out for that. I am going to talk to my patrons here soon. I just got to get real with them and talk about some things floating around in my brain. So patrons, keep an eye out for a live stream coming up. The next 6 days for me are so busy. It's kind of scary. So after that, things are going to return to some normalcy, finally. But that's it. Oh, Andrade got TKO'd. Oh. All right, guys. Cheers.